Yes, 100% completion. TV9 News and News 9 Plus is the first team here.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
A very good morning. You're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra, and on the show today, we'll discuss what the new finance bill expected to be tabled in Parliament today entails for you, the middle-class taxpayer. Joining me on the show to discuss that will be Karanjot Singh, partner at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan. Also on the show, we'll discuss what's in a brand name, the entire hula-hoo around Zepto being, Zomato being rebranded as Eternal. Is there really a big deal that social media is making it out to be? You're watching Morning Brief at 9. See you in just a bit. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's look at the headlines. Another week begins and another set of tariff announcements. Donald Trump to announce 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports into the US. India's new income tax bill to be tabled in Parliament. The draft bill has received the Cabinet's green light. We discuss what it is likely to entail for the middle class. Gold continues to surge, nears 87,000 rupees per 10 grams for a 24-carat piece. The safe haven investment continues to soar in global volatility even as the rupee tumbles to record lows. Zomato board approves the parent rebranding to Eternal. The company clarifies the Zomato app will continue to run with the Zomato brand name after netizens raised doubts. But what's in a brand name and why is rebranding indeed a big deal? We discuss today with Lloyd Matthias and Dilip Cherian. Staying with the startup space, PC Mustafa-led idli dosa batter maker ID Fresh Foods will list on Indian stock markets in 2027, as per media reports. Maruti Suzuki says ahead of making the e-Vitara the primary vehicle of Indian households, the company will install EV chargers every 10 kilometers in 100 cities. Remember, the e-Vitara was unveiled at the Bharat Mobility Expo last month and will hit the roads in March. Meanwhile, Bajaj Auto will drive into the e-rickshaw market this year in a bid to tap into the informal segment that registers sales of 45,000 units a month. Will Bajaj e-rickshaw be able to replicate the Bajaj Auto rickshaw success? We find out. There's a fresh standoff between factory workers at Samsung management. 500 factory workers sit in strike at Tamil Nadu plant after 3 workers were suspended by the Samsung management. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp parent Meta to lay off 5% of workforce. Over 3,000 bottom-ranked employees to be sacked. Let's begin with the top story. Starting this week, the Union Cabinet on Friday has approved the new income tax bill, which is likely to be presented in the Lok Sabha this week. Some reports also suggest that it could be tabled today. The bill is part of a broader push to reform the Indian taxation system. The new legislation, which is often referred to as the Direct Tax Code, is aimed at overhauling the existing tax structure, making it more streamlined and transparent. Remember, the bill is likely to be referred to the Standing Committee for further discussion and refinement of its provision. So what will the bill really focus on? Here's what we have been able to decipher so far. Well, the new income tax bill is likely to be a simplified language for better understanding of the tax structure. In addition to that, there's likely to be focus on increased compliance and reduced ambiguity, both in the language and the clauses referred to in the bill. There is likely to be scope for rationalizing the tax rate, even as budget after budget tax slabs could potentially change. Add to that, minimizing legal disputes which often arise out of the complexity of the 60-year-old tax bill is likely to be done away with. Building trust in the taxpayer as well as in the overall administrative process, this is something that the new tax bill proposes to offer, at least if you go by what Finance Minister Nadu said in her budget speech. Then there is also likely to be clearer definitions of exemptions, limits and liabilities of the taxpayers. Add to that, alignment of the Indian tax code with the global standards is something that the new tax bill would likely focus on. And then, of course, the government's focus on the middle class and ease of filing tax returns. That is something that we could see coming through by way of the new tax bill. And then clarity on new tax slabs across the old and new tax regime is something that we can expect from the new tax bill. Then let's try and understand these issues better and decipher what the new tax bill could mean for you, the tax-paying middle-class citizen living in India. I have with me this morning Karanjot Singh, partner, Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan joining in. Karanjot, good morning. Good to have you on News 9. Help us understand, what do you make of what is likely to be the changes in the new tax bill as opposed to the 60-year-old act which is in existence right now?
Yeah, good morning to all the viewers. So yes, as you said, I think the old act, it's been in existence for about 65 years now. It was felt increasingly that the old act was complicated. The languages were difficult to understand. There were explanations, there were provisos, and the act had become very voluminous. It was also felt that the act was acting as a deterrent to inviting fresh investments into India, because even the investors were feeling that there were no alternate dispute resolutions mechanism, and it was extremely difficult to ensure the stringent compliances that were currently in place. Many of them had come because of the legacy that the act had brought in. So the new act, as we understand from what has been stated by the Honorable Finance Minister up till now, is going to be half in terms of length, as also the chapters as compared to the existing law. We also understand that the differential rate regime as it existingly exists between different individuals, firms, companies, etc., there could be some sense of rationalization there, and that the rates could broadly be truncated between individuals and other persons. On top of that, we are also expecting that the Act may align with certain global standards, and the government may also be looking in integrating the BEPS solution into the new Act in the near future as well.
There's a lot of clarity likely to emerge for tax lawyers like yourself and people who understand and read the finer print of the tax law, Karanjot. But what does it really mean for the tax-paying citizen? Is there going to be something in it for the middle class, which is pretty much doing the heavy lifting of paying direct income taxes? What comes by way of the new tax bill for the citizen of the country?
See, one thing that is clear is that the government is paying a lot of attention to the middle class. I think the recent budget and the slab rate changes thereof are a testimony to that fact. Now, as far as the new bill is concerned, I believe the fact that if the language is simplified and the explanation provisos are removed and everything is stuck into simple subsections and truncating the language for each section, I think that will really make things easier to understand, not only for tax lawyers like me, but for public at large. Specific to middle class, I think we'll have to wait and see how things pan out. But I believe if the government still carries on the slab rates that were proposed in the budget for the longer run, that will be a big win for the middle class altogether.
And can the tax bill theoretically do away with the old tax regime? Because that is also something which has been a bit of a concern for those who continue to opt for the old tax regime by way of filing their taxes. Can the tax bill alone get rid of the old tax regime? Because if you remember, the budget was absolutely silent on the old tax regime.
You're absolutely right. See, it is very much possible. So, as of now, the old tax regime technically does not exist in Income Tax Act. It exists in the Finance Act. And every year we continue to see the slab rate changes to those as well. The deductions that are available in the old tax regime, they find place in the Income Tax Act. Now, we must remember that it has been the scheme and a phased movement for this government to do away with the complicated deduction-oriented schemes and to move forward with one simple tax regime. We saw it happening for corporates in 2019 and we saw it happening for individuals. And the government has repeatedly made attempts to make the new regime more lucrative. I'll not be surprised that if not in the new direct tax code, the government in the near future may end up doing with one simpler regime with lower reductions but increased threshold limits for paying taxes.
All right. Another aspect that we have seen come under discussion multiple times in the last 1 year or so, if memory serves me right, Karanjot, is the fact that the finance minister has often cited building trust with the taxpayer as one of the key tenets of the finance policy of the country. What is the trust deficit right now with respect to the existing Income Tax Act, and how does this trust issue get mitigated with the new tax bill?
So, see, it's been a long run. Between the taxman and the taxpayer, it's a game of cat and mouse. The taxman will always believe that the taxpayer end up devising tax saving schemes and they don't pay their legitimate share of taxes, while the taxpayer will always feel that the taxmen give them a rough hand and they try and recover excessive taxes. Now, in this race, if you look at it, it is always perceived from the taxpayer side that the government, that with the government there is a sense of trust deficit, that even when the taxpayers are trying to be compliant, they are slapped with high-pitched assessments and there are huge recoveries that are intended to be made against them. Now, in keeping that in mind, what the government has been trying to do is to bring in alternate dispute resolution mechanisms of the likes of filing updated returns to provide an opportunity to the taxpayers to go back and revisit the positions wherever needed and not litigate with the government. At the same front, I also remember government bringing in provisions granting immunity from penalties where the taxpayers agreed to settle their disputes. Another example would be the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, which the government has been bringing time and again, allowing the taxpayer to settle the disputes with the government. So there does seem to be a lot of thrust on building trust with the taxpayers by giving them opportunities to settle the disputes rather than getting into protracted litigation with the government. I do hope that the scheme does codify some of these provisions and carry forwards from this, providing better mechanisms to the taxpayers, because at the end of it, all taxpayers want certainty, not litigation.
All right. And talking about litigation and certainty, Karanjot, there's also this clause of penalty, which has been a fairly contentious one, given the fact that there are penalties up to 300% of the proposed or the estimated tax evasion. Do you think the penalty clauses in the new tax bill need to be relooked at, and would they have been relooked at, and is there merit in considering a lower tax penalty so that there is greater compliance even for those who erroneously or intentionally went ahead and did not file taxes correctly?
See, look, we have to understand more things more from a taxpayer standpoint, while ensuring that people who are intentionally evading taxes, they are also penalized. So what I would rather want is for government to identify certain cases and restrict the higher tax penalties only for a select category of cases where there are intentional tax evasions, people engaging in accommodation entries and things like that. So the higher tax penalties can be reserved only for those limited category of cases. Whereas I think in cases where there are just difference of interpretation, claims, etc., we should be looking at a scheme where either no penalties are imposed or nominal penalties are imposed. On top of it, I believe it should be at the forefront of the government to decriminalize many of the existing penal actions. That is to again bring in more confidence with the taxpayers. I think especially in cases where the tax differences are arising only on account of interpretational differences, prosecutions, etc., are clearly unwarranted, and the government should be looking to do away with those as well.
All right. There are also talks, Karanjot, about the global standards being introduced in the new income tax bill. What are these global standards, and what is it? What is the best tax code available that we can actually draw inspiration from here for India?
So the first and the forefront, what I look at are the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 recommendations which were given by OECD. Many of the European countries have ended up opting for these. Both of these, they grant some right back to the source country to tax the income of certain multinational enterprises, and also provide for a minimum global tax rate. Now, what we have seen of lately is that the America has really pulled out of this deal, and India has really said that they will sit back and see how the global scenario pans out around surrounding these. I think it's a little too early to say whether in the direct tax code the government will be opting for it. If I were to bet, maybe at this stage not. India will sit back and look how the global scenario pans out, especially with America pulling out of the deal once Trump has come into power.
Right. Well, let's leave it at that. Karanjot Singh, thank you so much for taking time out this morning and joining us here on News 9. Well, remember that the new tax bill is likely to be tabled in Parliament this week for sure, and some reports indicate that could perhaps be today as well. With that, it's time to head into a quick break. But on the other side of the break, we discuss Zomato parent rebranding as Eternal, and netizens going wild over whether the Zomato app will continue to exist or not, even though Zomato has made that clarification. Well, we'll discuss what really is in a brand name when it comes to a parent rebranding itself on the other side of the break with Dilip Cherian and Lloyd Matthias. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
And I'm falling for you like crazy. Ah, boom, boom. Every heartbeat is only for you. Every breath, every moment with you.
Shall we do it again?
My heart goes boom.
Unlimited Love. Bookings open on 14th February.
खेला होगा हर नहले पे दहला होगा ये बड़ा है स्टेज बड़ा है पूरा भारत साथ खड़ा है we are the tigers साथ खड़ा है we are the tigers गेम बड़ा है dribble like a rap pass setting up the trap kick it hard in the ball chuck there for the ball we are the tigers chuck there for the ball for the ball. We are the tigers. Shaka day for the ball. We are the tigers. Shaka day for the ball. Shaka day for the ball.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Markets have opened in the red one more Monday morning, despite a fillip likely to have come from the Reserve Bank of India after it cut interest rates by 25 basis points. But Trump's announcements on tariffs of steel and aluminium up to 25% is something that has likely spooked the Indian markets. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map and make sense of what some of the bigger stocks in the red are this morning. Well, bad news coming in. In fact, on the IT sector for sure, IT stocks, Infosys down almost half a percentage point, HCL Tech down about 0.35%. Meanwhile, Reliance Industries, ONGC, Coal India also taking a beating. ONGC is down about 1% this morning. Let's look at the BFSI sector. You've got HDFC Bank down about 0.76%, ICICI Bank down about half a percentage point this morning. Well, let's look at the utility companies, which could very well be impacted by the Trump tariffs. NTPC is down about a little over 1% now, 1.1%, whereas Power Grid is down about 1.6% in trade in early hours today, which is Monday, the 10th of February. Let's look at the key indices and see where they stand as markets opened at 9:15 a.m. Well, Nifty 50, Sensex both down. Sensex taking a bitter beating than Nifty. Sensex is down about 0.4%. Nifty 50 still struggling at the 23,500 levels. Meanwhile, volatility in the Indian markets has expanded about 6%, resting at about 15 points or so. Well, one more stock which is in focus today happens to be Zomato, and Zomato is down about 0.7% in early trade. Remember, this could be a fallout potentially of the announcement by the Zomato board that the parent is getting rebranded as Eternal. Well, joining me on the show today to discuss the rebranding exercise of Zomato and examples of other companies that have potentially rebranded and what it means for them and for their consumers are Dilip Cherian and Lloyd Matthias. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me here on Morning Brief at 9 this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let me start with you, Dilip. First, it's good to have you back on News 9 after a while. Zomato is rebranding to Eternal, and netizens are going absolutely wild. They feel that the Zomato app is going to be discontinued, and Zomato is making clarifications that no, the Zomato app will continue as is unabated. But rebranding exercises is nothing new. We've seen it over the past many decades of businesses. I think starting with Google's parent being rebranded as Alphabet, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp parent being rebranded as Meta. And here back in India, we've got our own examples as well. Paytm's parent is called 197 Communication. So what is the big deal and why do companies go ahead and rebrand their parents?
I think that the reasons why companies are attempting to change their brands is essentially three. One, they run into problems with the way they are designated. That could be the case with Paytm. The second is when they have mega acquisitions which are eating up a large part of the time or the share profile of their companies, which could be the Zomato reason. And the third is when there is either a controversy or some kind of niggling doubts about the nature of the brand itself as a result of changed consumer preferences, market perceptions, etc. So I would say that the logic needs to be seen within the context of both the company as well as the competitive scenario in which it is operating. I think that this needs to be done with great care, fabulous research, and intense study of how consumers will react. And the kind of reaction from netizens about fears about what the app is going to be called is the kind of trigger point that you need to avoid.
Let's bring in Lloyd Matthias into this discussion. Lloyd, from what we've heard, Dilip just mentioning the multiple reasons why brands undergo rebranding. And in this case, you're not talking about the brand itself being rebranded, but the parent as a whole being rebranded. Could it be perhaps to do with the fact that the quick commerce bundle within the parent company is likely to outshine the food delivery app, and that is what the parent was erstwhile referred to as? So could there be a play between which business and which element within a conglomerate is likely to drive profitability, and hence it may be counterproductive to have the brand name talk about a separate offering? Lloyd, if you could unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you for having me on your show, Karthik. Absolutely. I think with this name change, Zomato seeks to set the stage for expansion beyond its core food delivery and to an extent you can say right now it's quick commerce business. What Zomato has really known over the last decade has really been for its food delivery. And this signals bigger ambitions for the future. Zomato's brand, which is strongly being linked with food delivery, I think they're looking at it in a manner which I would call as typical corporate evolution. When a parent company shares its name with its flagship brand, sometimes that becomes a little, it becomes a little limiting. I think the Zomato board sees the opportunity of moving well beyond its core two businesses, one being food delivery through Zomato, and then of course the quick commerce business Blinkit, which actually right now is growing at a pace much faster. I think through this restructuring, what they're really doing is setting the groundwork to eventually evolve it into a full-fledged holding company, right? I think the first stage is what is called multi-brands. They have 4 multi-brands, out of which 2 are relatively small, which is Hyperpure and District. And I think really they're trying to evolve into a full-fledged holding company with multiple brands under it. I think this gives the company the flexibility in the long run to, I think, broad-base, diversify, or indeed even hive off some not so profitable businesses. So this kind of helps them shuffle the pack almost as much as, let's say, a Meta or Alphabet did when they elevated the holding company and separating the kind of operating brands or operating businesses over time, from maps to mail and such like. So I think it's a similar process that Zomato is doing.
All right, Dilip Cherian, I want to understand, some of these global examples that Lloyd just pointed out. While in the case of Google, I think the strategy has worked out fairly well because Alphabet now represents everything from the search engine to artificial intelligence, which could be in the form of Gemini and beyond, as well as, the Google Maps business and the Google Pay, which is really effective here in India for a business case for Alphabet. But something like Meta, could that have been, an example to be used as to how things can go wrong? Because at one point, Meta was betting big on the metaverse and that really did not take off.
Yeah, that distinctly is an example of global misfiring. There's no doubt that an obsession with a particular stream of thought, and usually by the founder, can be a mistake in terms of going across to consumers and to a larger market. Is Eternal going to do that? My suspicion is that Eternal seems to be, like Lloyd says, reflecting corporate ambition. And Eternal is a bit high-pitched, I would say. The whole business of instant delivery itself is being questioned in multiple places for a variety of reasons. And I worry that you are displaying a kind of ambition that perhaps is justified by some other acquisition that you have in mind, as the Zomato management may well have. But, do you need to do that till more vectors are at play? Sometimes you get into a hurry to do this because, remember, this kind of rebranding at the holding company level can only be done once in a given number of years. So it's a different thing to rebrand your products, which, for example, Levers has done with multiple products, they've had issues with market pushback or ethical pushback on some products and what they are meant to do. But I think that, displaying a greater measure and ensuring that the communications, what is key in any of these things is communications, and the investments that both Meta and Alphabet had to do to ensure that the company's visibility was of a certain kind is a commitment that companies like Zomato will have to do.
Absolutely. So I think brand communication, Lloyd, becomes a very, very important function here. And I remember it's been It's been more than 1.5 years since Elon Musk bought Twitter. And every time Twitter is now referred to as X, I think the bracket in every print publication, every digital article also says formerly Twitter. So, the whole communication aspect is something which requires a lot of explaining for viewers over a long period of time. So, at a time like that, do you think there was really a case for Zomato to have a high-browed parent name like Eternal?
Valid point. I think the first part, Zomato needs a lot more to do, clear the confusion that Zomato, the food delivery app, remains unaltered, right? So very clearly they have to establish that fact, because some of this communication has kind of blurred the issue and people generally have concerns. So I think that clearly is a big failing. I think the second thing is we have to recognize that Zomato has emerged as one of India's largest consumer internet companies last year, with its market cap touching almost 3 lakh crores, right? So I think as it's growing larger, the ambitions are growing. I think they've tasted great success in Blinkit. In a year and a half, Blinkit has emerged as among the largest quick commerce players. I think this is an opportunity when the board and the founder is looking beyond the core food delivery and quick commerce and possibly looking to evolve into a logistics and a tech company at large with various lines of businesses. And like I said, over time, they might shuffle around. They might even divest or sell some businesses or maybe list some of them independently. Or who's to say one day Blinkit could well be an independent entity. Right. So I think it's preparing the ground for a larger play for group Zomato, now called Eternal, and therefore have various different vectors of businesses. In that sense, it's a very, very laudable move. How they're going to establish Eternal in terms of, kind of holding it as a purely holding company and making sure communication is transparent down the line, that Zomato, Blinkit are going to be absolutely independent entities, and, obviously Hyperpure, District and the other brands or the other divisions they hope to launch, right, I think is a matter that will play out.
All right, so let's stay with the quick commerce boom and digress a little bit beyond just the brand name. Dilip Cherian, now you had a story last week that Zepto is now going to deliver test drive of the Skoda Kayak in 10 minutes. Right now you have another news report over the weekend which comes that there's a startup by the name of Topmate.io, which is going to deliver people to offer you career counseling in 10 minutes. Are we taking this whole 10-minute delivery narrative too far?
Without a doubt. I think that it's becoming a bit of a joke in many product categories. And what could eventually happen is that there could be category shaming. And I think that we are at a stage where it's one thing to deliver a set of branded grocery items or something. But when it comes to clothing or people or HR advice, I think companies are doing this to, in a sense, as a strategy of market entry by shock and awe. But I think it's on the verge of being pilloried, and it's not likely to be a very large business. However, in the technology space, never say that anything is never going to grow into a big business. Perhaps we will be shockingly surprised. But I would say that in many cases, this instant gratification model is becoming a bit of a conundrum as far as quality is concerned of the product itself.
Right, quality concerns, and never say never. Lloyd, final input from you. Is 2025 going to be the year of further explosion of quick commerce, or are we likely to see some consolidation in the space?
Karthik, I agree to a large extent with what Dilip said. I think sometimes this tends to stretch itself too wide. Having said which, I must say that, when Blinkit first launched, I thought this 10-minute thing was taking things too far. And then I saw how it altered people's buying habits. I mean, it's very common for families to sit on a breakfast table and suddenly discover, hey, the butter's run out or bread's run out. And then sitting on the table, the youngest in the family would typically Blinkit some bread, butter, jam, or whatever it takes. So I think it's altering behavior to a large extent. We're also looking at a younger generation that's very impatient. They want it now. And it's not just about food and groceries and regular supplies, right? Slowly it's about apparel, it's about books and various things they need. So I would not really question the direction. I know that some brands will go overboard, they'll promise too much, and I think 10 minutes could possibly stretch over time to being within half an hour. But we have to recognize that there is an instant gratification generation taking center stage. Their behavior is vastly different. The things they want are different. The time they need them is different. So I think quick commerce is here to stay. It will grow. There might be a few mishaps along the way, but by and large, I think we are in an era where a lot of things will be needed almost real time. And I think we have to accept that and therefore look at quick commerce growth in that context.
Absolutely. Well, you're talking about instant gratification, and it's not just restricted to groceries and your cheese or your butter running out, but iPhone 16 was one of the hottest selling items on quick delivery platforms last year when it launched. But let's leave it at that for now. Lloyd Matthias, Dilip Cherian, thank you so much for taking time out and joining us here on Morning Brief at 9. Moving on now, the rupee has plunged further. That's right. the Indian rupee has plunged 44 paisa to an all-time low of almost 88 rupees, 87.94 against the US dollar in early trade this morning. This comes after the rupee recovered about 9 paisa from its all-time low level of 87.5 against the US dollar on Friday. Remember, that happened after the Reserve Bank of India reduced the key policy repo rate by 25 basis points in line with street expectations. But news coming in this morning, the rupee pretty close to touching the 88 rupees to the dollar mark. Moving on now, Maruti Suzuki aims to boost charging infrastructure in India before it drives in the newly unveiled e-Vitara, the first EV from the Maruti stable in the country. The auto major says it plans to establish the e-Vitara as a primary vehicle for households, but not before it has fixed the country's charging infrastructure issues. Here's what the company said. The company aims to install fast chargers in the top 100 cities that account for over 97% of the EV sales in the country. And this is going to be installed at a frequency of every 10 kilometers. So Maruti Suzuki saying every 10 kilometers in the top 100 cities in the country, there is going to be a fast EV charger. Now, as per the industry figures, electric passenger vehicles in the country today are mostly bought as a second or a third vehicle in urban households. But remember, Maruti Suzuki that unveiled the electric SUV e-Vitara at the Bharat Mobility Global Expo last month is expected to make the car available for buyers in the month of March. The e-Vitara will be first exported to a few key markets overseas before being put on sale in India. Now, talking about the overall EV industry, well, a little over 1 lakh electric cars were sold in India in 2024, recording a 20% year-on-year growth, according to data released by the Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, or FADA. And staying with the auto sector, Bajaj Auto is now gearing up to enter the domestic e-rickshaw segment by the end of this fiscal, which ends on the 31st of March, to tap into what it calls a sizable opportunity in a fast-growing but highly unorganized market. This as per a PTI report. The company expects to get regulatory clearances towards the end of the ongoing quarter for its e-rickshaw that will enable it to enter the segment, which sells about 45,000 units every month. As per the company, almost 50% of the three-wheeled mobility is in the e-rick space, which is in the north and the eastern parts of India and a little bit in the west as well. Almost 45,000 e-rickshaws are retailed every month. Not only is this segment a highly fragmented one, but also import dependent. By introducing the e-rickshaw, Bajaj Auto says it hopes to organize this market and bring in fresh new business for the company. The company is also bullish on its electric scooter, the e-Chetak, which is also expected to increase market share in the electric two-wheeler segment on the back of the newly introduced 35 platform that provides a higher range, advanced displays, faster charging, and what the company calls best-in-class boot space. And before we take a break, let's look at what's happening in the world. Let's look at our global headlines. US President Donald Trump announces new 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports into the US, escalating trade tensions even further. As expected, markets react as Trump suspends tariffs on Mexico and Canada, but investors remain worried of trade war risks. Wall Street closed lower as Trump signaled more tariffs, mixed jobs data, and weak consumer confidence, all impacting US markets. e.l.f. Beauty's stock drops 28% after lowering sales and profit forecasts, blaming TikTok's uncertainty and LA wildfires for weak demand. US job growth slows in the month of January, but a 4% unemployment rate gives the Fed reason to hold interest rates steady for now. The Baltic states have successfully connected to European power grids, ending decades of energy ties with Russia and Belarus in historic shift for energy security. Meanwhile, Britain orders Apple to create backdoor access to user data, threatening encrypted storage for UK users. Global fast fashion maker Shein slashes valuation to $50 billion for London listing amid rising challenges, including US tariff adjustments. And Porsche shares plunged 7% after warning that new model costs and battery-related expenses will impact 2025 profits, making its worst day since its stock market debut. All these stories on the other side of Morning Brief at 9.
Associate sponsor, New Virtus GT line, style to wander.
Hello everyone, this is Papon and I am coming to Dilwalo Ki Dilli this Valentine's Day to perform for the World Travel and Tourism Festival. This one's going to be a big one. It's happening at the Major Dhyan Chand National Stadium near India Gate. It's going to be a major one. So go get your tickets at bookmyshow.com right now for the 14th of February. जल्दी मिलते हैं सब उस शाम को मजे करेंगे एक साथ गाने गाएंगे and let's make this Valentine's Day a special one.
And I'm falling for you like crazy. Ah, boom, boom. Every heartbeat is only for you. Every breath, every moment with you.
Shall we do it again?
My heart goes boom.
Unlimited Love. Bookings open on 14th February.
Your promise is IGI certified. Your ambition is IGI certified. 14-step grading process. 50 years of trust. IGI Trust Certified.
Mama must be missing us now.
Let's take it one day, give me one day. Feel the itch under my skin, it's a one day. You been like it when you see we end up, hey. It doesn't matter, just gotta get going.
New GT line, Taigun and Virtus. Volkswagen.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. A look at all the global stories in news this morning. Let's start with the United States. In a fresh move that could escalate global trade tensions, US President Donald Trump has announced plans to impose a new 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports into the country. Trump said the tariffs would be on top of existing duties, marking another major change in his trade policy. And that's not all. Trump also revealed that he will announce reciprocal tariffs as early as Tuesday or Wednesday. According to him, this is to match the tariff rates of other nations, ensuring that if a country imposes a tax on US goods, Washington will do the same in return. Remember, during his first term, Trump had already imposed 25 tariffs on steel and 10% on aluminum, though some trading partners, including Canada, Mexico and Brazil, were later granted exemptions.
I have more time to do what I want to do. So we're making our country larger. I don't want U.S. steel being owned by a foreign country. They can have they don't have a controlling, they have an investment. All they're going to have is an investment. U.S. Steel for 15 years was the greatest company in the world, the greatest #1 company in the world. And I'm not going to let another country buy it. We had a great meeting on that, but they are allowed to invest in it, and that's different. I'll be announcing probably Tuesday or Wednesday at a news conference reciprocal tariffs, and very simply, it's if they charge us, we charge them. That's all.
When does it go into effect?
Almost immediately, but I'll be announcing the details of it, highly detailed, and it'll be great for everybody, including the other countries. But if they are charging us 130% and we're charging them nothing, it's not going to stay that way. Every country will be reciprocal. That's right. Every country. Won't affect it.
Well, Donald Trump there on board the Air Force One, but investors had reacted positively after Donald Trump, before making this new announcement on tariffs on steel and aluminum, when Trump had announced the suspension of tariffs on Mexico and Canada, easing trade tensions and boosting market confidence. Now, with the world watching, everyone is waiting to see how these changes will affect the economy in coming days. From rapid shifts in trade policy to a strong market start in 2025, here's what's making headlines in business and finance in the week starting today.
From fast-changing tariff decisions to one market that's had a fast start to 2025, these are the stories to watch in business and finance in the coming week. Markets cheered U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to suspend tariffs on Mexico and Canada, but investors are unsure if the tariff talk is brinkmanship or will act to deepen global rivalries and intensify economic attacks on the U.S. Trump's decisions have supercharged market volatility and investor uncertainty. There's little hope of respite in the days ahead. The release of a key gauge of monthly U.S. consumer prices is set to test investor nerves. Trump's tariff threats triggered warnings from several Federal Reserve officials of the risk of an inflation pickup. A Reuters poll shows January's consumer price index, due Wednesday, is expected to show a 0.3% monthly increase. But the monetary policy outlook remains uncertain. Investors are gearing up for a prolonged tit-for-tat trade war between the world's two largest economies. Near-term focus remains on whether a conversation between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping actually happens, and if Trump could grant some kind of tariff deferment. With the prospect of future stimulus measures from Beijing uncertain, more investors are avoiding the Chinese market. Chinese consumer price data on Sunday is likely to underscore reasons to keep those bearish bets for now. Europe Inc. is ticking all the boxes: cheap valuations, earnings growth, and momentum. European equities have outperformed their Wall Street peers in the first 6 weeks of 2025, the first time in a decade. Tariffs are a wild card, but there are several potential catalysts for more near-term gains. So the question remains, will this rally last?
All right, let's move on from Trump's tariffs to energy in Europe. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania have announced a major energy milestone. The three countries successfully synchronized their electricity systems with the European continental power grid. This comes just one day after they severed decades-old energy ties with Russia and Belarus. More in this report.
Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania celebrated on Sunday their new connections to European power, literally. The Baltic states said they had successfully synchronized their electricity systems to the continental grid one day after severing decades-old energy ties to Russia and Belarus.
Today, history is made.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen commended the move at a ceremony in Lithuania's capital alongside the leaders of the three countries.
These chains of power lines linking you to hostile neighbors will be a thing of the past.
The three Baltic nations disconnected on Saturday from the IPS-UPS network established by the Soviet Union in the 1950s and now run by Russia. The complex switch away from the grid of their former imperial overlord was debated for years. It gained momentum after Moscow annexed Crimea in 2014 and invaded Ukraine in 2022. It's designed to integrate the Baltics more closely with the European Union and to boost the region's energy security. Latvia's energy minister was present for the symbolic moment when workers cut the wires in Velaka, just by the Russian border.
The new beginning of the new system working. It's more independent, more secure, and what's most important is the system is fully in our hand, our responsibility.
The chopped wire was handed out as keepsakes to cheering observers. The Baltic Sea region is on high alert following a string of power cable, telecom and gas pipeline outages since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. All were believed to have been caused by ships dragging anchors along the seabed. Russia has denied any involvement. The Kyiv-supporting nations stopped buying power from Russia after it invaded Ukraine, but have relied on the Russian grid to control frequencies and stabilize networks to avoid outages. For Russia, the decoupling means its Kaliningrad exclave, located between Lithuania, Poland and the Baltic Sea, is now cut off from Russia's main grid and has to maintain its own system.
All right, moving on to the United Kingdom now. Britain's security officials have demanded that Apple create a backdoor in its systems, allowing them to access all content uploaded by Apple users worldwide to the cloud. Now, this move raises concerns about privacy and data security, as it could give authorities unprecedented access to personal information stored by millions of users globally. Here's more.
Britain has ordered Apple to provide access to users' encrypted accounts. That's according to a report from the Washington Post on Friday, which cited people familiar with the matter. Security officials want the US tech giant to create a so-called backdoor, one that allows them to retrieve all the content any Apple user worldwide has uploaded to the cloud. One source said the iPhone maker is likely to stop offering encrypted storage in the UK. That's instead of breaking the security promises it made to its users everywhere. Apple did not respond to a Reuters request for comment. A British Home Office spokesperson said they don't comment on operational matters. Britain in January used its regulatory power to launch an investigation into Apple and Google. It was over their smartphone operating systems, app stores and browsers.
Shein, the online fast fashion retailer, is reportedly planning to cut its valuation to about $50 billion, likely for a London listing. This move comes as the company faces mounting challenges, marking a nearly 25% drop from its 2023 fundraising value. Remember, despite the setback, Shein remains one of the largest and most influential players in the online fast fashion space. Take a look.
Online fast fashion retailer Shein is reportedly set to cut its valuation in a potential London listing to around $50 billion. That's according to three people with knowledge of the matter. It would be nearly a quarter less than the company's 2023 fundraising value of $66 billion. Shein's business prospects have come under a cloud in recent days after the Trump administration said it would close the de minimis duty exemption in the US. The import rule had helped Shein keep prices low by allowing small value packages of less than $800 to be shipped duty-free. Fast-growing online retailers like Temu and Shein have built big businesses shipping products from China at rock-bottom prices, often using the de minimis rule. Analysts say its removal could hurt Shein's profitability and push up product prices in the US, its biggest market. Shein did not respond to a request for comment. The removal of the rule is part of Trump's imposition of an additional 10% tariff on China. Nearly half of all packages shipped under de minimis come from China, according to a congressional committee report. Shein was reportedly aiming to go public in London in the first half of this year, assuming it secured approvals from regulators in the UK as well as in China.
Shares of German luxury car maker Porsche have dipped 7%, its largest decline since it went public. The fall followed a warning that higher costs for new models and battery-related expenses would impact profitability in 2025. Investors reacted negatively, reflecting concerns about the car maker's ability to manage rising production and development costs, particularly in the electric vehicle segment. Take a look.
Porsche shares took a wrong turn Friday and tumbled 7%. It was the biggest drop among European firms and marked its worst day since listing on the stock market. Porsche shocked investors with a statement late Thursday it expected a profit margin of just 10 to 12% this year. That was well below analyst expectations and under its midterm target. One analyst called the margin forecast a major concern. They added investors will expect further explanation from management ahead of full-year results in March. The luxury automaker said it will take an $832 million hit to profits as it launches new combustion engine and plug-in hybrid models. Porsche was valued higher than its parent company Volkswagen when it made its stock market debut 3 years ago. But it's struggled to live up to that since then, as EV sales have struggled to get going and it's endured weak Chinese demand. Shares slumped just over a quarter last year. The company said last week it was in talks to end the contracts of its chief financial officer and sales chief early. That after both were criticised for Porsche's poor performance and weak share price.
Well, that's all we have time for in this edition of Morning Brief at 9. This is Karthik Malhotra signing off. But at 10 a.m., join Shriya Kundu as she brings you the latest in domestic and global news. You're watching News 9.
Mama must be missing us, na?
Let's take it for a spin, give me one day. Feel the itch under my skin, it's a fun day. You been like it when you see we are done, hey. It doesn't matter, just gotta get going.
New GT line, Tygoon and Virtus.